This is a book that means quite a lot to me. It's called Run to the Stars, and it's by an author that deserves so much more attention. I believe that they are the most underrated author of science fiction and fantasy. It's got conspiracy, mystery, it's got romance, and it's done in a way that has a very dense prose that is very difficult to get your hands on at first. But once you get into it, it's just like Neuromancer. The world itself is just as dense as the prose. So all of that work that you do to get into it, it really adds up and gives you this incredible experience. It's actually the only science fiction novel that he published. Otherwise, yeah, he did fantasy or he did historical nonfiction. So the dialogue might turn off some readers because there are certain characters who are Scottish and their accent is conveyed within the dialogue. And I know that a lot of people find that to be pretty outdated, but this is authentic because it comes from an author who legitimately is Scottish. So I'm going to talk a bit about the premise of the book. So this is a near future on the fringes of an ecological collapse. There is an authoritarian government it's a sort of a one-world government. The main character, Mark Bellamy, he's the head of security at a place called the Sea Level Facility. It is where they construct home ships to be sent off to this near star system where they've found a habitable planet. And they've sent one of these ships, one home ship, there. And apparently they've just arrived, but they haven't heard anything from them because it takes so long for the signal to get back. So the authoritarian government has made it very difficult to allocate the resources necessary to send off this second home ship. They're purposefully doing this because they want to rule the world. And if humanity were able to spread to another planet, they wouldn't be able to rule that planet. It would be kind of this gamble. It's almost like you're allowing an adversary to suddenly exist. If you're in the position of that authoritarian government, you wouldn't want them to get away with it. And yet they don't want to come across as evil, so they're not outright just destroying the project. They're not just murdering people. Well, they are, but we'll get to that. They're purposefully making it impossible for them to get certain resources that they'll need once they get onto that new planet, like mining equipment, all sorts of stuff. They don't want this mission to succeed. So the book starts off with Mark on vacation. His first vacation. He's been working as a security guy for like 20 years or something like that, if not more. He used to be in the military. He's ex-military, and now he's been this head of security. He makes sure that everyone's safe. He's a very, very altruistic guy, really good dude. He's in Scotland, where this girl has kind of snuck into his life. He's not looking for a relationship or anything. He's had some bad luck in the past, but she's also much younger than him. She's 19 and he's like 40, and so he's not showing any interest there, but she pounces him. It's something that doesn't degrade either character, which is interesting because it's a weird age gap, but at the same time it's done in a way that it's not the focal point of the connection between these two characters. It just is this thing that comes across as naturally as it possibly could. If you have issues with that, I'd say just try and get past it. The story itself, it's really good. It's really good. And that particular relationship leads somewhere very interesting in a way that that will hurt you. It will stab you in the heart and make you feel so sad. This book had a particular scene that made me feel physically upset. It happened before something occurred in my own relationship at the time that was eerily similar. This is a good example of why books are incredible. I was able to have this experience, and it prepared me for that same experience, to where it took the brunt of that force and made it to where it didn't destroy me. It was something that could have destroyed me, but it didn't, because I was able to kind of analyze it ahead of time. And this is why you read. This is why you read. Jumped ahead a little bit there, but just as they're getting acquainted, they're on the shores of Scotland, and this huge, what can only be described as a spaceship, crashes in the water in the bay there. And Mark Bellamy, he notices a flare get sent up, and he recognizes that this is a manned craft. And so his very first instinct is to dive in the water and just swim out. And he's able to rescue the sole pilot and get them back to shore. And he ends up spending the next week or so, or at least the next several days, living at Kirsty's house with her parents and her extended family. They have this huge sort of like farmland. They have a lot of land. They're able to allow the pilot to recuperate, and they ask him a few questions, and the pilot gives some vague sort of conspiratorial messages. Meanwhile, Mark is like, hey, just take it easy, chill, you've had a really hard time. I'm sure someone will come to help you out. And he's like, no, don't tell anyone that I'm here, please, for the love of God. And so he doesn't, but Kirsty's parents eventually do. And meanwhile, Mark and Kirsty are growing much closer. And while Mark is upstairs, kind of hidden away in a room, these enforcers come in and pick up the pilot. And the pilot's been doing fine at this point. He has no health issues whatsoever. He's not in danger of dying or anything, but they're insistent that they want to take him in and get him checked out, because this was a huge issue. The ship malfunctioned, and they want to make sure that he's doing okay. They don't fight him on that, but Mark, they don't see him there. They don't know that he's there. That's very important, because Mark goes back to work. And as the head of security at this base, the sea level base, he's able to look into some stuff, and he hears it as news. No one knows that he knows any of this. This is where you get into the conspiracy aspect of it, which is really riveting, really cool stuff. Mark finds out that this guy was killed. They say that, he didn't make it. He died from internal bleeding after the crash, which you know is bullshit. And he pretends like he doesn't know anything. But it seems like as time goes on, that they're poking and prodding, and it seems like they've noticed his subtle reactions to learning about this and the timing of him going on vacation. They're asking him, so where were you exactly? And it soon becomes clear that they know something's up. So he's subtly researching, kind of for the sake of his own life at this point. He eventually is contacted by the leader of this authoritarian government named, what's her name? Named Gudrun Thorberg. You see, that's why I needed to look it up. It was a weird name. So she pulls him in, and he's assuming like, oh my God, they're gonna kill me. So Kirsty is the only other person that knows about any of this. He doesn't want her involved, but she's like, no, I'm gonna be a main character, fuck you. So he goes in to his appointment, and during the appointment, he's kind of brought into this private room where he's with Gudrun Thorberg, I hope I got that right, and her right-hand man, who's this big, intimidating dude, dressed super nice, but you can tell like, oh, this guy might just pull out a gun and just shoot me at any moment. Gudrun Thorberg, she is 150 years old, at least, but she appears like she's 30 because of abuse of technology, essentially. She's just doing everything she can to stay young. She's this extremely hedonistic person, and she starts to, at first subtly, but then very aggressively, start touching him and stuff, and getting too close to him, and he feels extremely uncomfortable. But he's kind of dealing with it because he wants to find out what is going on, and this is kind of the only way. And so he's able to sort of manipulate her in that regard, and she starts telling him things. In fact, she tells him too much. They've discovered some very interesting things. All I'm going to say, I don't want to spoil it. I do want to spoil it. This is about the midpoint of the book. Anyway, they explain too much, and she realizes this, and they all sort of realize at once that Mark needs to die. So that's where you get the name Run to the Stars, is that now Mark has nowhere to hide on the planet Earth. His only chance is to get onto that second home ship and take off and go live on another planet. But of course, that authoritarian government doesn't want that ship to even leave, so him escaping is the same thing as civilization escaping. And it's this great way of tying together theme and character as one cohesive being. So as I said, this book has very personal significance to me, and it was very interesting how I came upon it. I went to a local bookstore called Lighthouse Books about a year ago and picked this up at complete random, just based on the book cover. At first I picked up one thing that had like a bunch of crazy robot stuff on it, but I was like, this looks way, way cooler. This artwork was done by John Berkey, who was the one who did all of the original illustration for Star Wars before it was a movie. So all of the concept art, there are a few really legendary pieces that he made that still persist in their aesthetic to this day. So I picked this up at complete random, and after reading it, it was so specific to the moment that I was living through, and it just felt like the stars aligned. So I went ahead and I read the first 2 installments of his Winter of the Worlds trilogy, the first being The Anvil of Ice, which I would say that if you're hesitant on picking up this story, but you're also kind of interested in checking out Mike Scott Rohan, which you should, I would say pick up The Anvil of Ice first, especially if you're okay with reading fantasy, if you're not specifically a sci-fi reader. Pick that book up. It's after he'd been writing for a few more years. As I said, this is his first published novel, and it's really good, but it's flawed. It's a flawed work. It's not perfect, but for me, it was perfect. So subjectively, it was perfect, but objectively, I recognize that this is not a perfect novel. However, I feel that The Anvil of Ice is a perfect novel. I think that it doesn't really depend on who you are reading it. I think you'll get something out of it. Its sequel is even better. So it's a great one to get invested into. I'm just about to start the third book, which seems to have higher ratings than the first 2. So I'm very excited to do those. I will do a couple of reviews on those here very shortly. But yeah, thank you so much for subscribing and liking all my videos. I was not expecting any sort of response. I was kind of doing this for fun, but now I'm hooked on it. So thank you.